Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 2 of the Overtime Show with your host, Joe Kerrigan. Today, I was joined by Jeremy Adley, my co host, and we had the pleasure of speaking to Paul Crockford, the offensive coordinator, and Daniel Asare, the running back coach for the London Olympians. We spoke to them about their team and what keeps them going through these difficult times. All right, guys. So here we have Daniel Asare, who's the running back coach for the Olympians, and Paul Crockford, who is the offensive coordinator for the London Olympians. Thank you guys so much for joining us. How are you guys doing today?
All's well so far. So far, so good. Just sort of prepping. We got practice tomorrow, so
Yep.
Just getting ready for that.
I think everything is good. I think it's just managing the situation with COVID right now, and we're doing a good job in adhering to all the protocols. I think it's just staying on top of that so we can do our best to prepare for the season coming up. So yeah.
How are you guys tackling the COVID pandemic? How are you guys keeping up with the training? How are you guys making sure that people can still get in from all over London and stuff like that?
I mean, at the moment, like Daniel just said, sort of the protocols we got in place at practice. Obviously, ensuring that everyone keeps their sort of distance where we can within training, making sure that everyone's sort of sanitizing and not everyone's mixing in too big of a group, making sure we split into little sort of pods and we stick in those pods and we sort of rotate round drills.
Okay.
With the guys coming in from outside, it can be difficult because we have, a lot of guys who obviously work and they move around quite a lot. So we have to put quite a big onus on the players as well for them to be safe. I understand that there's this huge thing going on right now, and there's some people who believe it, there's some people who don't believe it. But at the end of the day, we've all got to look after each other, whether you believe it or not. So we put it on them as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think Jeremy's got some questions about the specifics of your coaching.
So just to get into more of the technical side of stuff, obviously the last couple of years we've seen the transition of the collegiate game, especially in the last 5 years, to the NFL with a lot more RPOs, a lot more mobile quarterback play. I'm just wondering from your perspective, Paul, do you take ideas and schemes that are becoming popular in the NFL and the collegiate game and trying to implement them in the UK game?
I mean, I always say when you're sort of looking at the collegiate game or even the NFL game, it's fantastic to obviously see the plays and that and the things that they run themselves, but trying to implement too much of that into a game where it's solely amateurs and we solely have not a lot of time, it becomes quite hard. Yes, we can obviously take maybe one or two and sort of look at them and way we can tweak them to fit our offense, because that's generally how the teams should tend to work. Everyone can come in with an idea of a playbook or an idea of plays you want to run, but if you don't have the personnel to run it, there's really no point in trying.
Yeah. So you would be much more, in terms of making your game plan, it's pretty much rigid and set in what you're going to do week to week to week. There's not really much adjustments to it. It's more just the same style of offense. Yeah,
I mean, it would sort of be almost set to a degree. Now, there are sort of adaptions and things you can put onto it instead of just rolling from week to week to week with the same thing, because it becomes too easy to read. There's things you can do in terms of adjustments based on sort of defenders' leverage, defenders' positioning, whether you're facing man or zone. Those kind of adjustments are the kind of the things that we would be making. Not necessarily, we'd see a play in the NFL with, say, the Ravens and Lamar Jackson running, run pass options and things like that, and think, yeah, we need to put that in.
I think that's a really good question that you just asked, Jeremy. I think Coach Paul's probably the perfect person to ask that question with. From my experience, the British American football is a different game completely. I know it's American, but it's a completely different game, and they're coming from different backgrounds. Trying to implement a lot of college NFL schemes would be quite difficult, especially the understanding of the game. But we do keep a close eye. We have links as well to the US and to college teams as well. So we do, like Coach Paul was saying, try to edit our playbooks and make it a bit more dynamic. And but we are mindful of the environment we're in, and people are coming from different backgrounds, and their exposure to football is very, very different. So we try and, I don't want to use the word simplify it, but we have a game where it's easier to play rather than just putting in college plays and NFL plays. But
yeah.
Great question.
So just like if you're maybe facing a team then that doesn't really match up well, say with your offensive game plan, how then would you go about making adjustments for that, just to try and then try and put a game plan in then that maybe suits the ability level of the players that you've got?
Yeah, I mean, generally before games and before you face any team, you're going to want to do some form of scouting. You're going to want to see what they kind of run. So you should always come into a game prepared. You should never really go in blind. In terms of making adjustments, I guess on the day and things like that as well, if it's working, there's no real need to go away from it. I'm the kind of believer in, if it's working, I want you to stop me. If you can't stop me, I'll run it all day. So it's essentially that. And then what that does is, if they can't stop that, if another team's trying to scout us, they're thinking, wow, they only see 2 or 3 plays that we ran that whole game. And then all of a sudden when we play them, potentially we can bring something else out.
At this level, Paul, do you get quite a lot of information on teams you're playing? Because I'm not really sure. What's the level of scouting depth that you would maybe get on a team on a week-to-week basis?
Yeah, it can be quite difficult in terms of the way the game sort of advancing. More teams are trying to stream their games, and more teams are putting things online, things like that. What we've done in the past as well is we've had guys go down there and actually record other games and things like that, so we can scout. Because there's no rule to say that you can't turn up and watch. You can't turn up and note down things in a book, formations, tendencies, things like that. So most of the teams as well, if you ask for some, well, I coached a bit of university football as well at KCL, and most teams would sort of happily trade huddle film, sort of exchange for exchange. So they weren't too bad at doing that, to be fair.
Yeah. So what then would you say is the style of the league? So is it more passing, or would it be a bit more of a running style type of league?
I mean, it does vary from sort of team to team. I would say it is quite run heavy at the moment. I mean, the best team in the South, who are the national champions from last year, the Warriors, are a very heavy run set team, and they're very much a similar style of thing where they're going to run until you can stop them. It does vary from team to team. I know the Exiles like to throw the ball around a little bit and things like that. But again, I just think it's very much based on who you've got. Some teams try to do things with the personnel they don't have, and they just can't do it, but they still stick at it, and it's to a detriment of their team at sometimes.
How
would you be yourself?
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Don. Go ahead.
I was just saying that's a really good question, because I think in the UK, I think our quarterback play is probably a position I think we need to work more on. There are some really good quarterbacks, but I think we find it easier to install a lot of running plays. It's easier. I think especially with quarterback technique, it is very, very, very specific. And I think that is an area I think we do need to work on. I think there is generally good quarterback play. And like Coach was saying, it does depend on the style of the team, especially with the weather as well. When the weather gets muddy, especially if playing university ball, it's difficult to pass. And I think a lot of teams tend to run the ball. But I think the passing game in the UK is something that I do think we need to work on, whether that's through more experienced coaches, US coaches. We've got different QB concepts as well, which I've noticed as well, but it's a good question.
And yeah, just a quick one, just on top of that. I mean, it's quite similar to rugby. When a guy turns up and he's an athlete and he can run in rugby, they usually stick him on the wing or something. In American football, they usually put him at running back as well.
Yeah. So just then moving on to you, Dan. You're obviously the running back coach. You do a lot of running plays. So when you maybe do the odd passing play and you maybe have the running back in as a blocker, it's become a big theme in the NFL that the better running backs, they don't want to block. And then you've maybe got to substitute your starting running back out for your primary blocking running back. And it kind of gives away what you're doing. So I'm just kind of wondering, Dan, do you ever hear any feedback from any of your running backs you've coached? Like, do they not want to block, or do they find it hard to maybe block in the pass protection?
With the Olympians, I think we like to have players who can do everything, because I think what happens with that is, like you're saying, defenses can key on things, so they understand, okay, this player doesn't like to block, that they're going to maybe put in a blitz in, they're going to put in more pressure. We like to have an offense where our running backs, we can block and we can also catch the ball, we can run routes out the backfield, we can line up as a receiver, we're in pass protecting, we can run the ball. It helps our offense and our team. I think it becomes more of a disadvantage when you're limited as a running back, and as a coach, I like to coach running backs to do a lot of things. So for example, helping our offensive line, chipping, let's say we're chipping the defensive end, we're helping the offensive line, we're running the ball, we're pass protecting, so we don't need to substitute people. I think it's being multiple in what we can do at the running back position. I think more in the NFL, you see more situational plays, like you're saying. I think it's a different game in that sense, but in this game, in this country, we like to coach our backs to do multiple things.
Yeah. So have you seen? Obviously, it is a different. You've been saying it is a different game over here to what it is in America. But like I'm guessing, like with any league, when it starts off when it's infancy, it is a little bit. People don't really want to watch the product because it's not great. But I'm guessing like you have seen an improvement in player talent and the player ability, and the quality of the league definitely is getting better.
I think that's a great point, because that's really important if you're trying to grow the game, because ultimately it's a product. It's what talent or what are you seeing on the field? And I think we are getting more ties with the US, so we're getting more international players from Europe, players from Germany. There's a lot of history with Germany, with NFL Europe and their league they have. And it's helping the overall talent as well. I think the more we can branch out and be more open-minded to different players and coaches, it helps the product. I think it's really, really important to be open-minded when it comes to these things, because if you're an outsider, you want to see a good product, you want to invest in something which is exciting, and I think just being open-minded to different players and coaches does help the product of the game.
Yeah. Where do you mean? Go ahead.
Sorry. So how often do you guys play games? Is it every week?
So during season time, it is every week. We play on Sundays, so it's normally every week, that we play. We do get a bye week, so there are sometimes we might get a week off, but as soon as the season starts, it's a quick turnover. So it's Sunday to Sunday normally. Sunday, then you use Monday to rest, and then you come back, you review, and then you prepare for the next week. So it's a quick turnover. Did
you ever have an issue with keeping players motivated during the pandemic?
That's one thing which we have looked at, but ultimately what we do is we try to find players who have self-motivation. We make that quite an important part, because it's difficult to motivate players. If you're not really motivated, it can come across in your commitment, in the way you play, even on the field as well. You can see people who want to play, and I think it's hard as well with the resources as well. And this game, you might not have a lot of marketing push, so I can understand where that comes in. I mean, we're working, we have family, we have other commitments. So I think it's just managing that and just trying to find players or encourage people to have that self-motivation. It does help. we are looking at ways of marketing tools to help people to become more motivated. But at the end of the day, I think it is up to the individual to really want to be motivated.
Yeah, and I mean, just a quick one on that as well. We've done things in terms of having, like on-room classrooms, and always just trying to keep in touch with those players and keep them involved, because it's really easy for a lot of guys, and I've seen it before. They turn up on the Sunday, they have practice, and then we don't hear from them for a week, and then we'll see them again next Sunday, and it's almost like they're involved but not involved, if that makes sense. So you've got to try and keep them in it as much as you possibly can to take up football as an amateur sport as well. You've got to love the game and you've got to want to play. Like, you have to want to be here to do it, because there's no glory around it. There's no semi-pro here. There's no professional. You know what I mean? Unless you're sort of young and up and coming, and you can get to maybe like they've got the NFL Academy now, or try and get out to the States and play. If you're solely playing here, you've got to want to do it because you love the game.
Mm. Well, when I was talking to Dan briefly at the start, I mentioned that we'd spoken to Victor on Thursday, and Victor spoke a lot about the brotherhood of the team, and that it's the brotherhood that keeps him back, that keeps him coming back, and that kind of playing and fighting for each other. And you could really hear the passion in his voice when he was talking about it. So I imagine a lot of your players are probably like that.
Yeah, I think we've got a good bunch. I do believe that, and a lot of them, from what we've seen so far, they're all pretty much, they're committing themselves. They're speaking in the groups. They're bringing each other along. They're pulling each other through workouts. They're doing a fantastic job so far. So far, so good, as they say.
Yeah, just for me, I'm always curious when American sports crop up in the UK, where the league maybe goes, because obviously nothing's ever going to rival the NFL, even in America. It's the kingpin. So I'm just kind of curious as to where do you guys see the game going over here in terms of its development?
That's a good question. I think it's actually going from strength to strength. The reason why I say that is I studied in university, and actually, if you take your time to look at the game here, it is actually growing. A lot of universities have teams as well, which a lot of people don't realize. And like Coach Paul was saying, there is an emergence of things like the NFL Academy. Academies are propping up. The US is actually looking at a lot of players in the UK. Universities are investing more in American football teams. Amateur teams are coming up. So I do think there is a lot of growth in the UK, but I think the main thing is there needs to be a little bit more support from not just our governing bodies like BAFA, but other organizations to help with the resources, to help with the marketing push, just to help with the promotion of the game would be great and would help the growth. But I do think the game is growing, but maybe not at the rate which people want it to. And I do think help from other organizing bodies would be great.
Yeah. So if you get maybe that bit more backing from some of these other independent bodies, do you maybe see like a long term, and we are talking way down the future, but do you maybe see the UK becoming almost like a developmental country, just for guys that maybe aren't quite just there yet, or guys who would maybe not just so close to me making practice squads, maybe coming over to the UK, getting game time at a high level, and then teams in America come on, all right, they look pretty solid, let's take them onto the practice squad?
I think that's a long way in the future from where we are at the moment, if I'm being completely honest. I mean, in terms of what Dan just said, I agree with the whole BAFA and the backing from the governing bodies, but at the same time, what I've seen and my own personal experience is it's going to take a lot of the coaches stepping up as well and wanting to become better coaches, because ultimately it's the coaches who are teaching the players. You can have as many eager and as many talented guys as you want, but if the coaches aren't in the right place to teach them what they need to be taught in order to get where we need to get to, it sort of falls by the wayside. And that happens quite a lot up and down the country. There's a lot of teams sort of scattered around, and there's a lot of coaching staffs. And like I said, I'm not going to obviously name names, but there's some who sort of see it as they rock up maybe on a Sunday, it's a training, and then we don't train until the following Sunday. Some do it for that sort of the casual love of the sport, I guess, in terms of, trying to maybe potentially make it that next step.
No, I completely get that. It's just I've seen just with ice hockey, even in the UK, we're getting a lot more players from the UK are starting to move over to America. So like the talent level is rising every year. So it was just just curious, more or less a personal question for me, if you guys saw the league getting to that point where maybe we are starting to see some more UK talent, homegrown talent, taking the trip across to the likes of the States, even just to go to they would be recruited at college, just even for maybe 1 or 2 years.
I mean, I think there's definitely talent here to do it. There's definitely guys here who can make that jump. It's just about them getting that opportunity. And again, are they in the right places to help them in that? Because when you look at the sample size that they can pull from in the States, it's huge. The amount of players and the amount of guys that play the game over there is massive. So you've got to have that something a little bit special about you to even get a look in a lot of the time.
Just quickly saying, it definitely is a possibility. Like Coach Paul was saying, I think we are a little bit of a way off, but I do think there is. There has been a number of players who have gone to the US, and like you were saying, Jeremy, there's possibly it being a feeding channel from the UK to the US. I automatically think of, I don't know if you have NFL Europe. NFL Europe was exactly that. Even there were really good NFL players who their careers was resurrected from the NFL Europe. So there is possibilities of there being that link. But like Coach Paul was saying, there are other things I think we need to invest more in the coaches and the coaching scheme. But I think in the future that can be a possibility. But like I said as well, it's a combination of getting that support from other bodies and companies.
And would you guys maybe like then to see the return of NFL Europe? Because I know there's a lot of people in the UK who would like to see it come back.
Sorry for me to bring that up, but I'm a big advocate. I don't know too much about it. There was a program on Sky Sports recently about the history, and I know coaches who've been involved in it, and I thought it was a great thing. It was an amazing thing. It had the ability to cross boundaries and countries. There were some logistical problems, but I think there are problems which could be overcome, in my opinion. I mean, if you're investing in big teams, these are issues which I think can be resolved. I think the NFL Europe was a great idea, and it'd be great to see. I don't know if it comes back or something similar. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I
think they. Gone. No, sorry. I was just going to say the NFL Europe was a sort of fantastic thing. I mean, I think the way it's sort of seen as now is, the countries. I think the countries personally should develop inside themselves, and the way we're sort of set up at the moment with the teams that we have around, get those sort of established, and then maybe potentially play other teams in Europe. So it wouldn't necessarily become an NFL Europe thing, but if they were able to play more teams around Europe, like maybe European competitions or things like that. I know they've had them in the past, and teams have traveled to other countries. I think that's a good way of doing it. Still having that sort of the more teams around the UK with the coaches and stuff.
So would you then, Paul, be interested in seeing something like a version of almost like the Champions League in a way?
I would. I think that would be very interesting to see. Most definitely. I mean, they have, as I say, they have tried to do it a few times, and they're, predominantly the German teams and the Austrian teams and those guys that are sort of closer to each other who play a lot. We have had a couple of teams from the UK go out there and play teams as well. So I'm always a big fan of that, because some of those are like, they're called semi-pro, so they do have some Americans and some sort of pay players and stuff. They do get to pick, and it's interesting to see how they go up against other teams who might not be as fortunate or might not have that pool of the players.
Yeah, I'll be interested. I mean, just from even a casual fan perspective, I would be interested to see how the level between maybe the German teams and UK teams is different. Like, I would pay to see that. If it was even just a one-off game, but a European League style competition, I actually think that would do pretty well, to be honest. Just for the level of competition, I think it would help grow the game a lot.
I think it makes more sense than because when I was thinking about it the only real chance London has of its own franchise is a existing team relocating rather than London making its own franchise by itself. So I think having, the NFL as its own thing, and then having NFL Europe as, France, Italy, Germany, England, all playing each other and having it as a separate league. I think if I was the director of NFL, I would patent that straight away.
No, I think just touching on what Joe's saying, I think realistically the only team they're talking about making the switch over to the UK would be the Jacksonville Jags. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the reason they cancelled NFL Europe down, as you were saying, it was down to logistics. And to me, moving an entire franchise across the water and then trying to play constant international games would be a logistical nightmare. So I don't see then why, the NFL commissioner wouldn't then just say NFL Europe developmental, move that as a developmental league. We'll get guys out of the country, they'll experience different cultures, they'll grow and develop as people, and we'll get them to play at quite competitive levels. So I think if I was Commissioner Roger Goodell, I would be signing off on NFL Europe or something similar to
it. The only thing with that is from a logistics standpoint, I think that like we spoke a little bit about earlier, but the level of game has to be there because it has to entice fans, it has to entice sponsors, it has to get people on board in order to help subsidize things, because it's not going to be cheap, obviously, getting teams to go from country to country. So I do understand it from a logistics standpoint. And that's why I think, especially coming from England, from an English point of view, we need to develop our game better first before we even try to venture into playing other things. You've got to worry about your own stuff before you start worrying about other people's.
Yeah.
I do think it was...
Is that then maybe... Oh, go ahead, Joe. Go ahead.
Sorry, I do think it was pretty cool when I looked at the British leagues and the fact that you've got, like a similar kind of system of the different subdivisions, and you have relegations and promotions and the Brit Bowl playoffs. I think it's quite exciting, the league structure that you guys have got already.
It's always good, like when I spoke about the sort of the casual side of things, as you go down the leagues, because I think we have Prem, Div 1, Div 2, as things currently stand. As you go down the league, sometimes the Div 2s are seen as more like just the casual side, and that's not always the case for all of them. Some of them do put in the effort, to be better players, to be better at football itself, and it's sort of seen as there's like a huge divide between them. Now, there is a bit of a golfing class, obviously, if you were jumping from, say, like Div 2 to a Premiership side. In terms of work ethic, not always between all of the players. There are some players I've seen, I'll be honest, there's some players who are lazy in the Premiership, and there's some players who work their backsides off in Division 2. So it's definitely a good way of doing things. I enjoy with the promotion and the relegation.
Just from my own personal perspective then, guys, what's your hopes for the upcoming season then?
For us as the Olympians, I think we've been a team. We've got a term that we're using, which is on the rise. The Olympians have had a big history, and I think of recently we've kind of come up the ranks. And our hopes, I think, is to finish at least top 3. Top 2 if possible. The London Warriors, who are in our league, are a very formidable team. They're a good team, but realistically, if we can finish top 3, top 2, previous seasons, I think we've been very close to the London Blitz, and I think that can be interesting. But obviously with this whole COVID situation, we're just managing that. But I think if we can finish top 3, top 2.
I think so. For me personally as well, I know I just want to be able to play again. I just want to be able to get back out there, sort of even on the football practice field, the game time field and things like that, and just be able to be in that situation. Coming back from the sort of huge break we had from COVID and trying to work our training into it specifically, like what Coach Dan said, a top 3 would be great. Anything sort of less than that, I don't think I'll be personally happy with. Ideally, I want, even the Warriors are a fantastic team, but I still want number 1. They're a very formidable side, but I still want number 1 personally. But that's just me.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Unfortunately, we have to wrap it up because we've only got 5 minutes left. But thank you guys so much for taking time out of your day to come and answer our questions. And we hope all the best for the rest of the season. Anchor.fm/overtime show. I'll let you guys know when the episode's been edited up. And once again, thank you guys so much for joining us. And if you ever want to work with us again in the future, you have my contact details. And yeah.
Yep. Thank you guys for having us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, cheers, pal. Thanks.
Take care, guys. Look after yourselves.
See you.